Look, I'm sitting here in my office and I keep getting these calls. Reporters, managers, fighters, everyone wants to know the same thing. Who the hell is on these ranking panels and why won't I tell them? That's the question that started this whole mess. You think I want to deal with this crap? You think I enjoy having to explain to some writer from ESPN why they can't have a list of names? But here we are. I made the decision years ago to keep the panel anonymous. Not because I'm hiding something, not because there's some conspiracy. I did it because I knew what would happen the moment we released those names. Every fighter, every manager, every keyboard warrior would be blowing up these people's phones, their emails, their social media. They'd be getting death threats from fans whose favorite fighter dropped 2 spots. That's not theoretical. That's exactly what happened in the early days when we were more open about it. But now in 2025, everyone wants transparency. Everyone wants accountability. Fine, I get it. The problem is they want it until they actually get it. Then they'll complain about that too. The ranking system wasn't supposed to be perfect. Hell, nothing in this business is perfect. We created it because the athletic commissions wanted some kind of structure. They wanted to see who deserves title shots, who gets main events, who gets the big money fights. Before that, it was just me making calls based on what I thought would sell tickets. You know what's funny? People were happier when it was just me making those decisions. At least then they knew who to blame. We pulled together media members, people who cover the sport regularly, who understand what they're watching. Are they all perfect? No. Do they sometimes make decisions that don't make sense? Absolutely. But show me a perfect system and I'll show you something that doesn't exist. The real issue isn't the rankings. It's that everyone expects the rankings to tell the whole story. They don't. They never did. I've said this 1,000 times. Rankings are one factor. Fan interest is another. Availability is another. Sometimes a guy ranked number 6 gets a title shot because the guys above him are injured, or they just fought, or they don't sell tickets. That makes people mad. They want everything to be black and white. They want a ladder where everyone climbs one rung at a time. But that's not how this business works. It's never been how this business works. I remember when we first started getting serious about rankings. This was around 2013. We'd have these meetings where we'd go through every division, talk about who should be where. Even then, it was messy. You'd have a guy who lost to the champion by split decision, and another guy who beat 3 ranked opponents in a row. Who deserves to be ranked higher? Depends who you ask. The athletic commissions were breathing down our necks. They wanted structure, they wanted legitimacy. Boxing had rankings, so we needed rankings. What they didn't understand was that MMA is nothing like boxing. In boxing, you can avoid certain opponents for years while building your record. In MMA, especially in the UFC, everyone fights everyone eventually. We tried different approaches in those early days. We considered having regional panels. We talked about including former champions as voters. We even discussed fan voting for certain spots. Every idea had problems. Regional panels meant East Coast bias versus West Coast bias. Former champions brought personal grudges and old rivalries. Fan voting was just a popularity contest. The media members on the panel, they're not getting paid for this. They're doing it because they love the sport. Most of them are trying to be fair, but they're human beings with opinions. Some of them like wrestlers, some of them like strikers, some of them value recent wins more than overall records. And here's what nobody talks about. I don't control their votes. I literally cannot tell them who to rank where. I don't even know who's going to vote for what until the rankings come out. People think I'm in there manipulating everything behind the scenes, sending emails, making phone calls. Trust me, if I could control the rankings, there'd be a lot fewer headaches in my life. But that doesn't stop the conspiracy theories. Every time someone doesn't like where their favorite fighter is ranked, it's because Dana White is pulling strings. It's because the UFC is pushing certain fighters. It's because we're trying to protect our golden boys. Look, do I have favorites? Of course I do. Do I think some fighters are better draws than others? Obviously. But the rankings are separate from the matchmaking. I can't make a guy ranked number 10 fight for the title just because I like him. Well, I could try, but the athletic commissions would lose their minds. The anonymous panel thing has worked for over a decade. Nobody complained about it when their guy was moving up. It only became a problem when fighters started dropping for losses, or when new guys came in and jumped ahead of established names. Take someone like Arman Tsarukyan, great fighter, should probably be getting a title shot, but he's not the most exciting guy to watch, and he doesn't have the biggest following. So when Paddy Pimblett gets an interim title fight ahead of him, people start screaming about corrupted rankings. Here's the truth. Arman probably deserves that shot, based purely on wins and losses. But Paddy sells tickets. Paddy gets people talking. Paddy brings in viewers who might not otherwise watch UFC. That's not corruption. That's business. The ranking panel didn't put Paddy in that interim title fight. I did. The ranking said one thing, the business said another, and I went with the business. because at the end of the day, this is still a business. But instead of people being mad at me for that decision, they're mad at some anonymous media members who have nothing to do with matchmaking. They want to know who voted for what, so they can go harass those people on Twitter. You want to know why the panel is anonymous? Look at what happened to the judges in some of those controversial boxing matches. Look at the referee who worked the last big fight everyone disagreed with. These people get attacked online, their families get threatened, their careers get damaged, all for doing a job that's impossible to do perfectly. I've seen it happen in real time. A panel member accidentally likes a tweet about a fighter, and suddenly there are threads connecting dots that don't exist. People screenshot everything, analyze every public statement, try to figure out who voted for what based on their social media activity. It's insane. One of our panel members had to delete his Twitter account after a particularly controversial ranking update. People were going through his old tweets, finding posts about fighters from 2 years ago and using them as evidence that he was biased. The guy was just trying to cover the sport he loves, and fans turned him into some kind of conspiracy villain. I protect the panel because they're doing us a favor. They're trying to bring some objectivity to a subjective sport. And in return, they get criticized by people who think they could do it better, but have never tried. The system isn't perfect. I know that. Maybe it never will be. But it's better than having no system at all. And it's better than having me make every decision based on what I think will work. The transparency everyone's asking for, it sounds great until you actually get it. Then you realize that knowing who voted for what doesn't change anything. The rankings are still just opinions. The matchmaking still comes down to what makes sense for the business and the sport. But people don't want to hear that. They want someone to blame when their guy doesn't get the opportunity they think he deserves. They want to believe there's some secret room where we're deciding who gets pushed and who gets buried. Here's the secret room. It's my office. And most of the time, I'm just trying to make fights that people want to see while keeping everyone as happy as possible, which, by the way, is impossible. The old ranking systems don't work when your sport moves this fast. Fighters go 6 months between fights. Divisions get backed up. Everything changes overnight in this business. I remember one particular meeting we had in late 2024. The panel had voted and the results came back. They had dropped a guy 3 spots for losing a split decision to the #1 contender, but they kept another guy in the same position after he got knocked out by someone ranked below him. When I asked about the logic, I got 3 different explanations from 3 different panel members. That's when I knew we had a real problem. It wasn't that the panel was corrupt or incompetent. It was that they were applying different standards to different situations. And there was no way to maintain consistency across 15 weight classes with dozens of fighters constantly moving in and out of contention. The media started catching on to these inconsistencies. Twitter became this constant battleground where every ranking update got dissected like the Zapruder film. People would screenshot the old rankings versus the new ones and create these elaborate conspiracy theories about why certain moves were made. And here's the thing that really gets me. Half the people complaining don't even watch the fights. They see the results, they check the rankings, and they form these strong opinions based on nothing. They'll tell you that fighter X deserves to be ranked higher than fighter Y, but they didn't watch either of their last 3 fights. The panel members, at least they're watching. They might not always agree with each other. They might have biases, but they're putting in the work. They're studying film. They're analyzing performances. They're trying to evaluate things like strength of schedule and quality of opposition. But then you've got these social media experts who think they know better based on looking at a record sheet. And when the rankings don't match their expectations, suddenly it's evidence of corruption or incompetence. I've been in this business for over 20 years. I've seen how rankings work in other sports. There's always controversy. There's always disagreement. The difference is, in MMA, because we're smaller, everyone expects complete transparency and total control. They want to know not just who voted for what, but why they voted that way, what factors they considered, what they might have missed. That level of scrutiny isn't helpful. It's paralyzing. If the panel members know that every vote is going to be analyzed and criticized, they're going to start playing it safe. They're going to avoid making the kind of difficult decisions that actually improve the accuracy of the system. And let's be honest about what some of these transparency advocates really want. They don't want a better ranking system. They want leverage. They want to be able to pressure panel members to influence votes, to create public campaigns that force changes. I've seen managers try this stuff already. They'll put together highlight reels and statistical breakdowns, trying to make cases for their fighters. That's not ranking based on performance. That's ranking based on who has the best marketing team. The anonymous system protects against that. Panel members can focus on what they saw in the cage, not on outside pressure. That's exactly exactly what I was trying to prevent by keeping the system anonymous in the first place. The irony is that all this pressure for transparency is actually making the system less accurate, not more. The panel members who are most worried about backlash are the ones making the safest, most predictable votes. The ones who are willing to make tough calls and stick their necks out are getting tired of the criticism and starting to step back. We're losing some of our best evaluators because people can't handle the fact that ranking fights is subjective and difficult, and sometimes there are no perfect answers. You want to know what would happen if we released the full voting records tomorrow? Within a week, every panel member would be getting harassed on social media. Within a month, half of them would quit. Within 6 months, the only people willing to do the job would be people who don't care about accuracy. They just vote however they think will create the least drama. Is that better? Is that more transparent? Technically, yes. Is it more useful? Absolutely not. The ranking panel does their job. I do mine. Sometimes those things align perfectly, sometimes they don't. When they don't, I make the call on what actually happens. That's what they pay me for. I think about this stuff late at night sometimes. Maybe we could have algorithmic rankings, take the human opinion out completely. But algorithms can't watch fights. They can't see improvement, decline, or style matchups. The human element isn't a bug, it's a feature. The problem is humans disagree, and every disagreement becomes controversy. There's no perfect system because the thing we're trying to rank, fighting ability across multiple disciplines in constantly changing circumstances, isn't perfectly rankable. Here's what I know for sure. The current system works better than people think it does. Not perfectly, but well enough that we can identify legitimate contenders, create meaningful fights, and give fans a general idea of where fighters stand relative to each other. The fights themselves matter more than any ranking. When Arman Tsarukyan gets his shot, and he will get his shot, nobody's going to care what number he was when he got it. They're going to care how he performs when the lights are brightest. Same with Paddy Pimblett. All the criticism about him jumping ahead in line won't matter if he goes out there and proves he belongs at the top of the division. And if he doesn't, well, the rankings will sort themselves out pretty quickly. That's the beautiful thing about this sport. You can argue about rankings all you want, but eventually everyone has to step into the octagon and prove it. That's the only ranking that really matters, who can fight and who can't. The panel helps us organize that process. They help identify who should be fighting who's earned opportunities, who might be getting overlooked, but they're not the final word on anything. The fights are the final word. I'm going to keep protecting the anonymity of the panel because I believe it helps them do better work. I'm going to keep making matchmaking decisions based on multiple factors, not just rankings, because that's what creates the best fights and the most compelling stories. And I'm going to keep explaining this stuff to anyone who will listen, even though I know most people have already made up their minds about how the system should work. The transparency advocates aren't going away. There's probably going to come a time when the pressure gets so intense that we have to change something. When that happens, I hope people remember what they asked for. Once that anonymity is gone, the quality of rankings will suffer. The system will become more political, more focused on avoiding controversy than identifying the best fighters. But maybe that's what people really want. Maybe they don't actually care about having the most accurate possible rankings. Maybe they just want someone to yell at when their favorite fighter doesn't get the opportunities they think he deserves. If that's the case, then transparency will give them exactly what they're looking for. It just won't give them better rankings. So yeah, the panel stays anonymous. The system stays imperfect. And I'll keep making the fights that make sense, regardless of what some ranking says. Because at the end of the day, the fighters settle it in the octagon, not on some website. The controversy will continue. People will keep demanding transparency. And I'll keep protecting the people who are trying to do an impossible job, even when it makes me look like the bad guy. That's part of the job too. And honestly, I'm okay with being the bad guy if it means we keep making great fights.